All right, y'all, we're here in Ginza Square.
Ginza Crossing.
Somehow made it to Japan for the CarEdge cruise. So excited to be here. Here with David Chao from Automotive Press. David, talk to me a little bit about your background in automotive, because we're going to dive deep for a couple minutes here on what's going on with these manufacturing plants.
Yes.
Not too much on tariffs, but just kind of what's going on with the plants and why it's so difficult to move them around. But why should anyone in the CarEdge community be listening to you right now, David?
Well, good question. So first of all, thank you so much for watching us. And Zach and I go back many years. You were like so amazing in terms of hosting me way back when my channel was still very small.
It was my dad's idea. All right, so my dad. No, just kidding.
But both of you guys were just so amazing.
Yep.
And but I was born and raised in Tokyo, grew up in Japan, but lived in the U.S., educated in the U.S. and also in Canada.
Yeah.
And I went to work for multiple different car companies, including Toyota, General Motors. I was both doing manufacturing, engineering, that's majority of my work.
Yeah.
But also design cars for a living, and lived in Michigan for that purpose. And then go back and forth between Japan and Canada, where I live right now in Vancouver. And I have a channel called Automotive Press. Hopefully you know about me.
We'll put the link in the description. David is by far the most credentialed person we've ever had on the channel. I want to be very clear.
You're just too nice to me.
Okay, so David, it's an uncertain time right now. We're here at the Nissan showroom. They're having to react to tariffs. Let's talk a little bit about what these manufacturers do to change their manufacturing plans. Help us understand.
Okay, so ultimately the tariffs, I'm going to walk by the way and talk about it.
Let's look. Yeah.
But ultimately the tariffs are designed to bring manufacturing to U.S. as a base, right? They have to react quickly to overcompensate some of the things that are happening.
Yeah.
And there's basically three ways companies can do that. An easiest way, and the one that companies are already doing, is to immediately increase production within the U.S. base they already have, their existing factories.
Yeah, these manufacturers already have plants there. And that's kind of the goal of tariffs to begin with, was like, hey, get domestic production.
Exactly.
That's step number one. That's just like...
And it's already happening. It's going to happen even more if the tariffs keeps up.
Okay.
So, like Honda at Ohio plant, Marysville, Toyota plant in Kentucky. Toyota has many plants in different places. But yeah, they're all going to try to increase the capacity of the most common, most popular models to the U.S. production, so they can increase the U.S. production, potentially avoiding tariffs and so forth.
Yeah.
It's also the easiest if they can just simply add more models.
Like this beautiful Nissan Z might be getting made in the USA sometime.
You never know, right?
You never know. Okay.
Yeah. But I would suspect the niche models will
of course,
because they wouldn't matter too much if there's some additional tariffs.
For sure.
But Nissan Rogue, for example, I think they're gonna move what they're producing both in the U.S. and Japan. But moving forward, I think most of them will come from U.S.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those kind of stuff will happen because it's easier to do. It's very easy to figure out what to do step by step.
Yeah.
And other than the fact that maybe if they already hit the capacity in the U.S., they're going to have to add additional shift, which is not an ideal thing to do because Japanese car companies like to only have two shifts, not a third shift. Well, they keep the third shift for maintenance and optimizing efficiency and stuff like that. So if you want to increase more or bring a model to the U.S. that have not been produced in U.S. before, then they're going to have to do one of two things: either build a whole new factory or buy an existing factory. So if you buy an existing factory, which happens a lot, they can buy from another automotive manufacturer that are selling. Like, for example, Nissan might be selling some of their factories.
Yeah.
You buy them out and you retrofit with your own engineering and manufacturing and start producing your product at this newly purchased place.
Can I ask a really dumb question?
No, of course, no question.
Is that like okay, we retrofitted, we're good, or did that take time?
Oh, so that still takes time. So it's still easier and faster than the third option, which is to build a whole new factory. So we'll come back to that in a second. So if you were to take an existing factory and retrofit with your own engineering, most of the time you still have to take all the equipment out, put all new equipment in, maybe even change the workforce if you want to have a different principle or different philosophy for human resources.
Yeah.
So I would say minimum of 2 years, potentially 3 to 4 years, to take an existing factory, retrofit to produce your own cars. Now, it all depends on what kind of factory you're buying. If you're, let's say if Honda bought out a Nissan factory for argument's sake, and the factory is very new, very modernized, and the equipment can be reused, they'll reutilize that. But in most cases, they're going to have to rip out the equipment or modify heavily because the equipment has been custom built for those models, right?
So let's let this sink in for a second. For all the lay people like me who don't do this professionally like you do, we've got one option, which is increase the production domestically in the United States. And we already know that not a lot of vehicles are actually final assembly in the United States. A lot of these vehicles come from Canada, Mexico, or overseas.
That's right.
So then option two is purchasing existing factories or assets in the United States and retrofitting them to be able to produce the vehicles we need.
That's right.
That takes, you said, a minimum?
Minimum 2 years, potentially 3 to 4 years.
Let that sink in for a second. I mean, so the potential impact of tariffs to try and, I don't know, reduce globalization and have things happen domestically. Right. It's not like you can snap your fingers, even in that easier of the, 3 solutions we have here. Because something tells me building a whole factory from scratch is time-consuming and costly.
Massive thing. Yeah. Now, if you look at the history of the automotive industry, many companies have purchased existing plant, but in those cases, the actual product didn't change. So, if you recall decades ago, like, Ford owned Mazda, but then it got sold out.
Yeah.
So the Flat Rock, Michigan plant used to be a Mazda plant, and it became a Ford plant. Toyota bought a Subaru plant in Indiana, but they were producing the same car, just the actual owner switched places.
Sure.
In those cases, you can be up and running in less than a year to year and a half.
Gotcha.
It still takes at least a year to do that.
Yeah.
Because all the principles, their philosophy and methodologies are different.
Yeah.
But let's say being optimistic, you can do it, let's say in 2 years. That's still a long time because in 2 years, this whole tariff thing could be gone or changed, and there may not be a need.
2 years, 2 months, 2
That's
weeks.
a long time.
No, I mean, it's changing daily. So it's a hard decision, I imagine, for a Nissan, for a Honda, for a Toyota to make.
That's right.
And an even harder decision if they were going to set up a whole new facility. Yeah. What's that option? Is it even a realistic option?
Sure. So, I mean, there are many examples where it makes sense to build a whole new factory. Again, there's only limited number of, we'll look over here. There's only limited number of factories that you can buy out. There's not that many to begin with.
Yeah.
Or they might not be willing to sell, or the plant that you might want to buy is not an ideal candidate, right, for takeover. So then you're gonna have to build a brand new factory from scratch, do a feasibility study, plan the whole factory, build it, manufacture, put the equipment in. I mean, it's minimum of 4 to 6 years. Like 4 years will be unheard of. So I don't know if you recall, I was involved in GM Suzuki joint venture factory, brand new factory from scratch. I was hired on the second year of the planning. So it still took 2 more years for the factory to be built.
Wow.
That was the 4th year, and that was considered pretty fast back in those days.
Wow.
So minimum 4 years, probably more realistically these days with all the stuff happening in supply chain, it's probably like 5 years when they actually start producing the car.
David, wow.
Yeah, it's a long time. By that time, the politics would have changed again, potentially change again, and we could be facing a completely different scenario. And also the cost of building a whole new factory, we're talking about not hundreds of millions, but billions, right?
Yeah.
And so it is not ideal. And it's especially the fact that senior executive, all the different car companies have said, both in person and also online, that they can't make these billion-dollar decisions when the policy changes so
quickly.
Yeah, so you could decide to build a whole new factory under the best circumstances, and it may no longer be advantageous to do that when something changes.
Yeah.
So, that's the problem, is that it's not that they don't want to invest, it's that the policy or the approach may change.
Yeah.
And therefore, their strategy have to be very agile and flexible, and automotive manufacturers are by design cannot be agile, right? It's just
this car looks agile, but I think building it is not.
No, exactly. It still takes years to design and build it. And by the way, this car is they already announced that this is going to be discontinued.
Yeah.
For example, Japan, only made in Japan.
Yeah.
So there's just so many ups and downs in the auto industry, and car companies will not make decisions on a very kind of ever-changing landscape.
Yeah.
And which means that they're stuck, they're bound and they're frozen because they don't know what to do.
So I want to put you on the spot because we're here in Tokyo. I mean, this is a country that is storied for their automotive production, literally in the Nissan showroom, right?
Yes.
If you were an executive at one of these companies and you've got these 3 options on the table, we can increase production within our existing, I'm saying domestic because, back in the States, so in the United States, We can try and purchase and retrofit existing factories in the United States, or we can do new capital investments and build out infrastructure to produce vehicles.
That's right.
If you're sitting at the top of this tower that we're in,
Yes.
what decision are you making? Because
Right.
what decisions we've seen thus far are increasing production locally, and maybe the policy will change. Are you investing billions, David, or what are you doing?
No one's gonna build it. Well, I shouldn't say no one, but it would be strange and very unusual for car companies under this circumstance to decide to make a new factory unless they already have a plan to build a brand new factory for other reasons. No one's gonna plan to build a brand new factory because of the tariffs or policy change, because it's just too risky. We're risking billions of dollars, so they're not gonna do that. I don't think, honestly, they're going to be able to buy any existing factories. I don't see any factories for sale. There will be some Nissan plants that I think they announced will closing down. But Nissan has basically a plant in Mississippi, in the Canton, that builds the trucks, and then plants in also Tennessee. That's a massive one. I don't see them closing the Tennessee one, obviously, for any reason. And the Canton one is also important factory, right? So, who's gonna, even though Nissan might be closing some factories, there's none to buy. Right? And so anyone else that's gonna be selling and closing the factory, maybe some of the EV manufacturers that's gone under, but they're not surviving, right? But they're small plants. Because EVs by nature have a small footprint. You're not building engine, you're not building transmission. It's basically a skateboard with batteries and motors. You can slap on the body and build it.
I'm going to use that line. I'm not an engineer, so I'm not allowed to say that, but now that I heard an engineer say it, I'm going to use that line.
It's way easier. That's why EV startups come and go, because basically you design the platform, or someone designed it for you. You put a body on top, you have a car, right?
So it's not like we can take the existing infrastructure that's been allocated for that and say, okay, now we're going to produce Pathfinders there, for example.
Because they're designed for EV, gasoline-powered cars. In manufacturing, there's a whole different story. Right? So I don't know what to say other than, all they can do, I think, which is exactly what they're doing, is to increase capacity, move some cars back and forth. So the one that's not selling very well, move it back to Japan. The more popular one, move it to the US, and then buy time, so that hopefully tariffs will go away or change dramatically, and that they don't have to make additional investment that will require new plants. Now, if the tariffs stay and or additional tariffs comes into play, they may be forced to build a new factory or do something more drastic. But I can tell you right now, no one is taking that right now because it's too risky to make those expensive investment decisions, right? So they're gonna wait a bit.
Wow, such good insights from you, David. Really appreciate it. Check out David's channel, Automotive Press. Again, one of the most qualified, if not the most qualified people we've had on the channel. No, I'm being honest. We're here in Japan. We've got the guy who coaches and teaches this stuff. So please check out David's channel. David, thanks so much for sharing your insights.
Yeah, it was fun.
Appreciate it
so much. See you guys.